welcome to Millennial Musings, our second Halloween special. I am Isabella.
And I'm Gladys. And yeah, last week was part 1 where we discussed a couple of frogging cases. Go listen to that one if you haven't yet. And today we will dive into the question that we asked ourselves, which is, which true crime case shocked you? If you want some more, I don't know, crime stories, then stay here. And if not, then next week we'll be back with our shit, I'm a woman theme.
Yes, exactly. But just a warning already, get ready for some craziness today. Because like we said, we both listen to true crime quite a lot. And we chose the ones that did really shock us. So, or like intrigue us. So yeah. Before we get into this, Gladys, how was the Comic-Con? Because you said you went to Comic-Con this weekend.
Yes. So it's now Sunday morning when we're recording this. I'm very tired as well, so forgive me if I'm a bit of a mess this episode, but I'll try my best. But no, we went to Comic-Con yesterday, and it was lovely. I love me a good Comic-Con. I mean, I've been in Belgium, but this was my first time in London, and it's just really nice. My favorite thing is like the independent artists who have their stalls and everything. It's just really nice to see the work that they create. And I bought some nice things, another tote bag, like I don't have 150 already, and like a couple of very nice prints, like a Schitt's Creek print and everything that will look very nice on my walls. So yeah, I loved it. It was great. And also just, watching people, seeing how they dress up and everything. Some people go all out and it's very impressive. So yeah, that was great. How was your Saturday? I mean, I know how it was, so but I'll ask anyway for the people at home.
That sounds great with the Comic-Con, though. I really want to go to one. I've never been, and I really, really want to go.
Or you can join us in May. There's another one in May.
Is it in London as well?
Yeah, it's twice a year, and apparently the one in May is even nicer because the weather's nice and people are like outside doing things and all of that. So
yes, I will join you. This sounds amazing. Thank you. But yes, my Saturday was unbelievable because I went to visit my future puppy. We went to the woman who has the puppies and we got to play with we were meant to play with all of them, but they were all snoozing like there was no tomorrow. They were not, you could not wake them up. We even let their mom in to lick them awake, but it didn't work. But they were adorable. We chose our puppy, and yeah, we have a new team member in our podcast.
Yeah.
What do you say? Podcast team. A new addition, and we will introduce her to you once she arrives, because she will get working the moment she will arrive here.
Yeah, we're using her for views and listens immediately.
Yes, she's gonna be the bait. No, she's adorable. It was really cute. I did wake her up in the end just to see her awake. We were allowed to. She didn't bother much. She just left and went into her crate and slept. So that's a good sign. She's a good sleeper. We need a good sleeper in this house. So
the pictures did look very, very cute.
Yeah. Oh my god, it was too much. It was an overload. My endorphins spiked so much yesterday. They're probably gone today. But this, if not that, the 2 cases will take all my endorphins away anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of, it will probably be quite, well, I don't know if it will be long, but we will of course have a bit of a discussion afterwards as well. So let's maybe just get right into it. I can't believe I have to be talking for so long. It's so weird with us because we constantly have a conversation. So even though we maybe, if you add everything up, we do talk a lot. But when it's I noticed it last week as well, and it's when you actually need to tell a story, you just need to talk nonstop.
Yeah, and it's different things you need to watch out for. Like when I was editing it, and even after editing, when I just listened to it once it went live, I realized, oh my god, I'm saying so many times. So sorry for that. I will watch out. Or I need to catch breath. While editing, I had to cut out how often I was let me just get a breather.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels very different when you need to share something that you've prepared. I don't know. It feels like, oh, I'm performing in a way now, you know. So yeah, but I'll do my very best. I do have to say this case is not, I mean, of course it's not nice what happens, but it's not necessarily gory or anything. It's not graphic. But I've heard that yours will be a bit more of that. So that's maybe good. Maybe it's good that we have a little bit of a mix. So I will start with the less graphic one then.
It's more like a murder mystery.
It is kind of, it is a murder mystery. Yeah, I would say so. So I am doing a Belgian case. Not the one every Belgian person is thinking of now. Not that one. I would need about 5 episodes, and also I don't want to get into that. But one that everyone in Flanders, I think, definitely knows. Although it also got some international attention, apparently, because this case has everything. It's a love triangle. It's very intriguing. It is a little bit of a mystery. So, and also it had to be a Belgian case because for such a small country, there's a lot of shenanigans going on. So I do have to say that I based my research on a documentary that I watched on this, like a 2-parter that I can share. We'll put it in the show notes is that how you say that? Show notes? Yeah, I guess so. And then also probably my favorite podcast. It's Flemish, so yeah. If you don't understand Dutch, can't really listen to it. It's called De Volksjury, and yeah, I really like it. It's also I think it's maybe even the first true crime podcast, maybe even the first podcast that I started listening to. So yes, big shout out to them because they did a wonderful job. But I didn't want to tell the story in exactly the same way because as I was listening and taking notes, I was like, oh my God, they do this so well and their structure is so great. But I didn't just want to give a translated version of it. So I kind of changed things and added things from the documentary and then left things out and, so whatever. So if you know this case or if you've already listened to it, then I will still try to make it interesting. Our story today starts where so many tragedies start, with a love triangle. So there are 3 main characters here, and by the end of the episode, one of them will be dead, one will be in prison, one will be left, and may have gotten away with murder. Who knows? We'll see.
This is already so good.
That's the best part, I think. So the main location for our story today is Parachute Club Zwartberg. Now, of course, the names and everything might be a little bit of a challenge, so I'll try to make them as accessible as possible for non-Dutch speakers, okay? So this is a parachute club. The name doesn't really matter. And people go there during weekends, most of the time during weekends, and they stay over. That's important. So often they go there on like a Saturday and then they stay until Sunday because if the weather's nice, they want to get as many jumps in as possible, sometimes even 10 a day, which was very surprising to me. I thought it took a very long time to, I don't know, perform a jump or whatever. But apparently, no, sometimes they jump up to 10 times a day. So yeah, if the weather's really nice, then they like to just get the most out of the weekend as possible. So then most people stay there. There's, like I said, 3 main characters here. The first one, his name is Marcel. Marcel Somers in Dutch. So Marcel, he's a Dutch guy, but he joins the parachute club in Flanders, which isn't that far away. I think it's fine. It's Belgium. It's not that big. So he joins that club, and the interesting thing about him is that he has a relationship with 2 women in the club. So the first person you need to know about is Els van Doren. We will call her Els VD, okay? Els is a very common first name in Flanders. so common, in fact, that the other main character is also called Else. But we'll call this one Else VD, and we'll give the other one a nickname because they did that as well, because it was very confusing to them as well. So Else VD, she is 37 years old, and she's married to Jan, another very Dutch name. They have 2 children. Also, interestingly, we both worked with, with people with these names.
I was just going to say, I maybe know 5 Dutch, Flemish people, and that's all their names.
2 of which are Else and Jan.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then there's me, which is not a common name at all. Okay, so she's married to Jan. They have 2 children. Her husband actually used to be a member of the parachute club as well, but he wasn't as passionate as his wife, and he ended up leaving. Together, they own a jewelry store. And so, like I said, Else often stays over at the club because it's also not super close to where they live. So she just stays there over the weekend, and they kind of stay camping there. Like they sleep in sleeping bags, which would not be for me, but okay, to do that every weekend, hell no. But so she's basically there every weekend, which is, of course, how she met Marcel as well. So the club knows about this relationship, of course, because they're both members of this. But they kind of got the impression that Elsa's relationship with her husband was very brother and sister. They thought, okay, they're together because they have a business and because they have children. They still obviously care about each other, but they didn't really think, they maybe even thought maybe he knows about this. Maybe that's just a kind of arrangement that they have. So since she started the affair with Marcel, rather than stay at the club, she actually stays over at his place because he lives, I think, the closest out of all of them. So she stays at his apartment from like Saturday until Sunday, most weekends. So, but yeah, it is assumed that Jan didn't know about the affair, so that she was kind of living a little bit of a double life. And she told someone else from the club that she was very happy with Jan, and she was very happy with Marcel, which of course is fine if, you know, of course there's people who have multiple relationships, which I think is absolutely fine if every party is kind of aware of that. But yeah, we're assuming here that Jan was not aware of this. Else is also a very experienced jumper. So she has almost 3,000 jumps to her name, which is very impressive. So then one day, somebody else joins the club. Like I said, another woman called Else. But to avoid confusion, she gets the nickname Babs. So that's how we will call her going forward. So Babs is 21, which is, of course, a lot younger than Else and Marcel, because Marcel is in his 40s, I think, or around 40.
No.
So Babs, what we know about her is that she had a very troubled childhood. Her dad died when she was very young, and she had a lot of, her and her mum didn't really get along that much. She suffered from depression, and then at quite a young age, she was also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So she has kind of had a history with depression, and she finds this new hobby because she had issues keeping friendships and everything as well. So when she finds this new hobby, she really likes it. Like I said, she's only 21. Her and Else become good friends, and they're on the phone a lot, and she really starts having friendships in that club. So then in 2005, there is a period of time where Else VD is at the club less frequently because she's injured, so she can't join for a little bit. And during that time, Marcel starts training Babs a little bit. So then a relationship between them starts as well. There was a bit of an arrangement where Marcel was like, okay, he apparently was very clear about, okay, Else is my priority, and she gets the weekends. So Saturday and Sunday are for her, but on other days, mainly Fridays, we can hang out. Yeah, so the arrangement was basically that Babs would go over there on Friday, stay over, and then Els would go there the next day and stay until Sunday. So Babs knew what she was getting into. Of course, Els was not aware of this. So she didn't know that her friend was also having an affair with Marcel. But then again, she was married as well. So it's an odd love triangle. But also, yeah, we can't forget that Babs was 21 years old, which is an age where you're very, I don't know, easily influenced or whatever. And also what we know about her as well is that she has big self-esteem issues. So she's kind of always had this feeling of like that she's not really worthy of love. And then Marcel is an older man. So yeah, and they're all members of this club, which can be a little bit of a pressure cooker putting all of them together. Yeah. So then we go to the 10th of November, 2006. So a week before what happened, but we'll get to that. So a week before, this was a Friday. So Babs goes to Marcel's place, as was the agreement between them that Fridays were her days. And all of a sudden, Els VD shows up as well, which of course is a little bit awkward for everyone involved because we're assuming that she doesn't know. But of course, Babs knows. So Babs is kind of like Marcel was very clear about this. Els is his number one lover, so Babs kind of gets sent. She gets sent to the other room, to like the guest room, while Marcel and Els have sex in the bedroom, and apparently they were quite loud. so there must be. I mean, I'm just asking the question here, like Els arriving there and seeing her friend who also like lives quite far away. So it's not like they just were hanging out or something, you have to actively drive to that club for quite a while. So they're hanging out. She must have kind of been like, what is going on here? This must have been very awkward. I don't know. There just had to have been some tension, I think. But so Babs sleeps in the other room, and she says that she kind of accepted her fate. She knew this. She knew that she was second place. She was fine with that. So the plan was they were supposed to go jumping the next day, so that Saturday, but the weather was too bad, so they end up not going. They do go the next weekend. So that's the 18th of November, 2006. So that is a Saturday. And so Babs, Els, Marcel, and an unfortunate fourth person get on this plane together. So there's just one person who's completely oblivious to all of this, or well, he kind of knows probably, but also isn't really involved in this. Is on that plane with them when they jump. I think Babs misses the cue, so she jumps later. So the other three jump first. And then what they do is they do this kind of formation in the air where they, like make a star or whatever, they do something. And so Marcel, that fourth person, and Els VD, they jump together, and basically they see that Els is trying to open her parachute. She's trying to open her backup parachute, and nothing's happening. So she's trying very hard to open it. She has a GoPro, so everything is filmed, so you can like see where she's looking, so you can see her look like up and try. So she's making very wide like arm gestures and everything. So she's actively trying to open it, but to no avail, it doesn't open, and she crashes in someone's garden. Which, can I just say, the people who live there are in that documentary, and this man was like, yeah, my wife heard a bang and then she saw a leg, so we knew it probably wasn't good. Can you just imagine somebody landing in your garden like that?
I think when I was younger, that wasn't bad at all. But like there was a paraglider and he was just landing in the street like normal. He wanted to land. That was fine. That was so exciting. But then imagine like you just sit there and you hear bang and there's a mush of a person in your garden. And also being Els, like the dread you must feel, because how long's the fall? 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes? I don't know.
Well, that is actually not clear, but she did fall from 4,000 meters, which is unbelievable.
There's so much time where you realize I am going to die now.
Yeah, because she was actively, so one thing that was very clear is it was not suicide, because she was actively trying until the very last second to save herself. Also, this was at a speed of around 200 kilometers or 125 miles an hour that she crashed. So actually, she wasn't visibly injured. So, like, her body looked fine, but the fall did kill her immediately.
So, I mean, I have no idea. So, her head wasn't, because I would imagine everything just to burst open, but that didn't happen. It was all inside.
Okay. Yeah, apparently it wasn't really visible from the outside or anything. But yeah, an ambulance was called, of course, but they were too late. And then an expert was called immediately as well. And this is the person, he's in the documentary as well, I think, who does the annual checks of the parachutes, which I think checking the parachutes only once a year. I don't know, like, a lot can happen. A lot can get, like, worn, or different strings can, like, what if they just...
I will want that checked every time before I jump.
Right? Yeah. I mean, from what I understood, it's like an annual check. So, okay, never mind. So this expert, he gets there and he immediately says, okay, this parachute has been sabotaged. So basically, two things happened here. So there's a harness that she wears, which, of course, the parachute is kind of like a big wing almost, so then there's like, I think 4 different strings that attach the parachute to the harness. One of those had been cut, but then there was a little bit of discussion around if maybe the medics did that, but they say, no, we did not touch anything. But the bigger thing here is that there is one very important part missing, and this is called the pilot chute. And without getting too technical, basically what happens is if you jump, there's, of course, the big parachute, but what you do is you take the smaller one out and you kind of throw that in the air. So then there's like a small little parachute, and then that catches wind, and then that is attached to the big parachute. So then that will open. But that had been cut off and it was missing. So basically, if there's no pilot chute, there's no way that big one can open. What's also very, I don't know, eerie in a way, is that she did not make any noise during this. So she was just saving all of her energy to try and, like, save herself. There's nothing, there's no screaming, nothing. So immediately the big part here becomes, okay, where did that pilot chute go? And the police actually ask people to check their trees and their roofs and everything. They put like a letter in people's mailbox that's like, see if you can find like a red small piece of fabric because it's really important and everything. Immediately, a murder investigation is opened. And so the question becomes, who did this? Because the murderer needs 3 things in this case. They need a motive, they need the knowledge how to sabotage a parachute, and they need the opportunity. But of course, in this story, that could be basically anyone. So the first one the police look at, which is, I think, standard, is the husband. So they look at Jan because maybe he found out about the affair. He, of course, used to be a member of the club as well. So he has the knowledge of parachutes. He is interrogated, I think, only once and kind of immediately believed. He just seems very genuine. He seems distraught. He tells them that they kind of start asking indirect questions, and it becomes clear that he has no idea about the affair. Jan does tell them that there was a letter. So at some point they received a letter, an anonymous letter, that said that Else needed to tell the truth about something. So he did ask her about this, but she had some issues with family members and everything. So she's like, yeah, they just don't want us to live our lives. They just want to, I don't know, harm us or whatever. So that was kind of the end of that. So he just believed that and that was it. So then they look at the lover, Marcel. So again, they interrogate him and everything, but it becomes very clear that he really loved her, that he really, really cared for her. And also the police say that he had absolutely no reason, because if he didn't want her anymore, he could have just ended it. But then what they do is they check his phone activity, and that's how they find out about the other woman, Babs. So she is actually interrogated a couple of times, and there's a few things that don't exactly make her look good. So the first big important thing is that she is the one who ends up finding that pilot chute. So she at some point goes to the police herself, and she says that she found it in a tree. Now this tree, and you can see it in the documentary as well, it's high. It's a very high tree. And this is, of course, kind of like a tiny thing. And she says that she was driving, which people find it difficult to believe that you just see that in a tree that high when you're driving and focusing on the road, because the weather wasn't the best. It's a road that's always very busy. So another member of the club also says that he took that same drive and to kind of check. And he's like, yeah, you would have to look up in a very uncomfortable way. Nobody really does that when they're driving and focusing on the road. So it's also interesting that she alerts the police to this, even though she maybe knows that in the position that she's in as like the other woman, it maybe doesn't make her look good if she goes to the police to say that she now also found this, but she still does that. She still goes there and she actively works with them. So to explain this, she says that she got lost in that area because there were roadworks and things like that. But then it turns out that it's an area that they go to all the time, because there's like a chips place, very Flemish, that they went to basically every weekend. So she knows that area very well. I mean, they say that, but then me, literally, if I have the road that I always take and there's roadworks, I'm absolutely lost. Like I have zero orientation. So I don't have that feeling of like, oh yeah, but I can just go here and here and here and get to the same point. No, I'm lost. So they say that, I don't know. I think it's possible that you get lost in an area that you know very well. But what is also remarkable is that people report that she left the club very early that day. And then there's kind of like a 3 to 4 hour gap between her leaving the club and her finding the pilot chute. So the question becomes, did she go look for it? Okay. So then the second thing is the letter. So, but Babs gets asked about this, but she says that it wasn't her. But then after a while, she kind of regrets that. And the way I understand it is she kind of contacts the police again herself, because she's like, yeah, it doesn't really sit well with me because I lied about something. And she says that she did write the letter to the family. Now, we have to keep in mind here that this woman was 21 years old. So everything is very dramatic and everything is very exaggerated. And her friends also say, yeah, we did talk about this, we talk, and like, you're 21, you're a student, because she was a student, she was doing a teaching degree, and you tell your friends like, okay, I'm dating this older man, but actually my friend is dating him as well. You know how that goes. I mean, I've never been in that position personally, but I can imagine. And then the friends being like, oh well, he should be yours, just, I don't know, maybe just send a letter to the husband or something. Everything is very dramatic and exaggerated. So we do have to keep her age into account here, I think. Then she gets taken to the police station, and she at some point gets questioned from 7 p.m. until 5 a.m. without a lawyer present, which, as we know, people that will kind of break some people, or people will say things to just leave. Or you start doubting yourself even, but she says nothing. She still says, no, it wasn't me. Then another thing that they found out was that at some point she went to America, and what happened there was she went there. It was kind of like a convention, like a parachute convention thing. And she met this guy there. They slept together, but then he kind of dumped her, or he acted like it hadn't happened, like he didn't really want anything with her. And then apparently at some point they all got drunk, and then she was driving a car, but like kind of where the planes are parked as well. She was driving a car. The guy was on the roof of that, sitting on the roof of that car. And she apparently all of a sudden started driving very fast and like hit the wing of the plane. So that is considered kind of her being angry about feeling rejected. So that is something that they find out and that they think is very interesting. Before one of her interrogations as well, she overdosed and she was actually taken to hospital. People are not 100% sure if she tried to commit suicide or if this was a cry for attention, but she did take a lot of medication. She had written a letter for her mum. And in that letter, she says that she just cannot deal with the realization that even if the murderer is found, her friend is still gone. But she also says in that letter that it was not her. She says, "It's not me. I hope the person who did this gets caught." And the police see this as a very clear sign that she has done it and that she just can't live with that. So actually from that point on, Babs becomes the perfect person in the eyes of the police. She has the motive, the knowledge, and the opportunity, because their story becomes that she did it that weekend before in Marcel's apartment when she was staying in the guest room. Also, at some point, Marcel's scissors then are confiscated because they think that that might be the murder weapon, but then it's only tested a year later. So this is what they think is the murder weapon, but then nobody does anything with it for a year. But then when it gets tested, nothing was found, maybe also because it just wasn't kept properly or whatever. But yeah, nothing is found, no fibers from the parachutes, no DNA, nothing. She, throughout all of this, remains very calm, and when the police, even at some point, they allude to the fact that they have found DNA, her DNA on the parachute, she remains super calm and she says, "Yeah, of course you found DNA. We help each other. We're a parachute club. We touch each other's parachutes all the time." Actually, they didn't find any DNA. So that's the thing, because I know that in the US, for example, the police are allowed to lie to get a confession. I did not know that was the case in Belgium as well. I'm actually not sure if it is. That's something that I need to look up. But yeah, what they did find was male DNA on the parachute, but this was never investigated. So it kind of becomes a thing where many people say from that point on, there's a tunnel vision, and the police kind of just make her the perfect murderer because she fits the story. So then the trial starts in 2010. So that's 4 years later, which is very Belgian. So in the meantime, Babs was in prison for about a year initially, but then she was let go. So in the meantime, so they were like, okay, until this trial starts, you can go. You're free. Maybe with some conditions or something, I'm not sure, but she was let go. So she actually finishes her studies. She does an internship as a teacher, and everyone is extremely impressed with her because she puts a lot of time and energy into the children who have difficulties and everything, and she's really a good teacher, and everyone is really happy with her. And the school actually tells her, okay, when you get cleared of everything, you can start right away. You have a job here. So yeah, she just makes a really good impression there. Then what happens as well is that she gets investigated by psychiatrists. This is something that they do in cases like this to check if a person can be held accountable for their actions or not. But these psychiatrists can also be hired by both sides. And as people who have listened to or watched many true crime cases will know, you can make these people say almost anything. So the psychiatrists from the victim's side, they say that she clearly is very egocentric, that she's a narcissist, that she's a massive manipulator. But then the ones on her side, they don't see any signs of that. They say, no, also her IQ is very high. So she's above average intelligent. So there's clashing opinions about this. But of course, with her history of depression and everything, she does have that perfect profile again. So the lawyers in this case are Jeff Vermassen and Vic van Aalst. And so these people, these are very famous lawyers, both of them. Apparently, especially Jeff Vermassen, he's almost, well, he's a public figure. And every time there's a very high profile murder case, he does the victim's side. And he loves the camera. Jeff loves the media. So he's 76 now and he's still working. He's still going for it. So like I said, he's the victim's family's lawyer. So he says his whole thing is, okay, she's a manipulator. She doesn't have empathy. He focuses a lot on her role in this love triangle. Of course, she was jealous. And then her finding the parachute and also her mental state or her history with mental illness gets dragged into this a lot as well. It's a murder case, so kind of similar to the UK, I think. There's a jury of 12 members of the public who then decide what they think they decide on their verdict. But they need to have a clear reasoning. So they can't just be like, oh yeah, we think this because that's just our feeling. Like they need to have a very clear reasoning and they need to give a motive. What's also interesting about this case is kind of the time. So this was 2010. So social media existed already, but it wasn't big like it is now. What still was very big were newspapers and just the media on the television. This case was actually broadcast live on TV. It was everywhere. And the podcast, the Volksjury, they say that was very typical for that time because that would never happen again today. That would just not be done. Also, newspapers did polls on this, which is very morally questionable, I would say. So they did polls like, do you think she did it? So this was a classic trial by media, I think. And she also says, which I thought was quite sad, they interview her right before she goes in and she says, I just hope I get a serene and normal process and it hasn't been decided already by like the media, because it also did get international attention, even in Korea and everything. They reported on this case. Yeah, because this is just very intriguing. This is a very juicy case. Then also what I thought was just brilliant was Elsa's makeup bag has gone missing. So the family they want it back because it's something that she used a lot. It's something that they associate with her. They want it back. Jeff Vermassen, the lawyer, he says that Babs has this. He's like, yeah, she has this. She kept it as some kind of trophy. Then, and you cannot make this up, the jury, so these 12 people, start going through some bags with evidence and everything, and this random person ends up finding this makeup bag. But a lot of this trial is like riding on that makeup bag. So they let people know and they're like, okay, does this mean we need to do this again, or what is this? But they kind of keep it quiet. They keep it quiet for the media. The lawyers do get informed, but they decide to just continue with the trial. So also they drive, so they all have to go on this bus and they drive to the club with like the jury in it, with the lawyers in it, all of them. They ride in kind of like this travel bus, like a very bright orangey bus. They drive to that club because the lawyers want to show things, like, okay, is it possible that the parachute could have been sabotaged at the club? Some people say no, because somebody always would have seen, but then other people say, well, Babs's side say, no, it's very possible that someone else could have done it. So yeah, they take everyone on a day trip to that club. Then after about 4 or 5 hours, the jury reaches their unanimous verdict and they say that Babs is guilty. And she gets sentenced also because she keeps saying she's innocent and everything. So we know the sentence will be quite high, and it is high. It's 30 years in prison. But there is a law in Belgium, the law of Lejeune, which means that you can get out after 1/3 of your sentence. You're eligible for parole. So she was actually released in June 2022 under strict conditions and supervision. So she does have a job now and everything. But I think, so in total, she was in prison for 12 and a half years, I think. And so she can go to work, but then it's kind of, estimated how long it takes her to get home, and then she can't leave her house after that time. And she can't go to the province of Antwerp where the family live, or so it's apparently these are very classic conditions when a person is released after a while. So yeah, that was the case. Do you have initial reactions?
I'm just so confused. Like, is she really guilty? Or was it Marcel after all? He just really got away with it?
So this is the main thing, because also there was public divide. Some people thought that she was also, the jury was unanimous. So all 12 people thought, okay, she did it. But of course, the main thing here, there is no proof. And so there's public,
no direct evidence. Like,
there's nothing. And so the public really did not, like, there were protests and everything, because there were Facebook groups that were like, she's innocent. Then of course they all blamed the lawyer, so Geoffrey got quite a bit of shit as well. His family got death threats, which I mean, these people are doing their jobs, it's so I don't really think that they should be blamed. But yeah, the thing is, I mean, she has the perfect profile, right? She has the motive, of course, jealousy, the knowledge how to do it, the mental health history. This feels very like, well, she could have done it, and it would make the most sense for her to have done it. So let's say that she did it. Because this whole story is kind of built on the assumption, really, that she lost it that weekend, that the three of them were in that apartment, and that she was very upset, which of course is a reasonable assumption, because most people would probably be upset if all of a sudden they're like banned to the guest room because the other woman shows up. But there's nothing that shows she was upset. Nobody can prove that she actually was upset. Maybe she had actually accepted this. Maybe she did have very low self-esteem. So maybe in her mind, it was like, yeah, of course I'm second place, like that. Yeah, that's just what it is. That's just it. I mean, I completely understand that Else VD's family wants to blame someone because she's the obvious choice. But there are other options as well, of course. I mean, yeah, there is Marcel. They had an affair for about 5 years, I think. So that might be something. Or the parachute was actually at her family's house most days. So the husband was only interrogated once. And so the main thing here is, which I think is very interesting and very controversial, is that the lawyer, Geoffrey Masser, he says that you don't need proof, because in many cases you don't have proof. In cases like sexual assault or whatever, you don't always have proof, which, okay, makes sense. And it can be very difficult, of course, if the rule is like, oh, you always need undeniable evidence. Then yeah, in things like sexual assault cases, then that means that nobody would ever be punished for something like that, because it's almost never possible to really prove that. So it becomes a question of like, okay, are you more certain than not? But then I kind of have an issue with the thing of like, oh, if everything points in one direction, then that has to be it, because that's just very scary. Because if that becomes the standard, then it's like, okay, so is it enough to just be in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Exactly. And also, a story can be spun a certain way. Like, if this just seems the most logic to you, then that's how it is. And you can see it with the Central Park Five. The story was just spun in a way,
yeah,
that it made sense to the public, made sense to the investigators, and they lost the biggest parts of their lives in prison.
Of course, and what makes sense to the public, in a society that's very racist, yeah, then that will make the most sense to the public that it's the five black kids. Like that is just
And it's the
very
same with Babs, like Babsy, how you call him? Babsy.
yeah. Also, I should have said her full name probably. So her first name is also Else. Her second name is Klottermans. Else Klottermans. That's her real name. But yeah, I think that would have been a bit too confusing.
Yeah, I agree. But like, it seems like they used her mental illness as an excuse. They used the bias that exists about mental illness. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she has done it. I mean, if you just think about, but she could have been jealous and all those things. Sure, she might as well have done it. I don't know. I'm not taking any
Of
sides here. I'm
course,
just
no.
saying it's very scary to just decide around circumstantial evidence. And it's not even that big of, like, the circumstantial evidence here is not that massive.
No, the only thing is just that she looks a little bit suspicious. That's kind of it. Yeah.
I mean, if she's done it, she went to prison for 12 years and her life doesn't seem to be easy. And if she didn't do it, at least she's out of prison.
I know. I mean, yes, the thing is, if you would ask me, okay, who's your main suspect, it would be her as well. But I don't think that's enough to lock someone up. And in that way, it's very similar to quite a very famous American case, the staircase murder with Michael and Kathleen Peterson, where, if you don't know it, basically Kathleen Peterson dies one night because she falls down the stairs. Her husband, Michael, is there as well. Then it becomes a whole thing because apparently someone else he knew also years ago also died by falling down the stairs, another woman. And he went to prison for, I think, 8 years as well, was then released because he got a retrial. And, I watched quite a few documentaries on that and everything. And then I have this feeling where I'm like, I am 100% convinced that this man did it. 100% convinced. But I don't think he should have been convicted because there is nothing against him. Everything looks very suspicious. There's a shit ton of blood in that hallway, which is weird if you just fall down the stairs. And then there's the owl theory that basically an owl flew in, injured her, and that's why she fell. Which apparently isn't even that weird because there were accidents with owls in that area. I don't know. It's wild. Honestly, watch these documentaries. But I'm like, this guy, it's just too much coincidence. He has to have done it. But I don't think that's enough to lock someone up. Coincidence is not enough, I think, because what if this man really did not do it? What
if he's just the most
unlucky person,
unluckiest guy on the planet, and that is what happened? But then also with him, I don't know, the circumstantial evidence is quite extreme in that case. That's what I mean. The difference between I mean, maybe I just don't know enough about your case, but the circumstantial evidence with that guy is so intense. Like, even in the autopsy, I think people said that woman who fell down the stairs, it seems like someone has hit her head more than
and then there's the murder weapon that they're like they lost it, and then that shows up in the garage after a couple of weeks all of a sudden. It's just there. Like, there's things that are very sus, definitely.
Yeah. But wow, thank you for doing all that research. I think you did really well, like a real true crime podcaster. Well done.
Thank you. Okay.
I feel pressured now.
I do. Well, I'm sure you will be wonderful as well. I do have a question though. Would you want to be in a jury? Because I'm always like, yes, oh my God, I would love this if it's like an interesting case. But actually, that responsibility, no. I mean, yeah.
No, I don't like, going back to my puppy, but there are other families that are going to pick up a dog, and I don't know them. They will be lovely, I'm sure. But I was like, what if I picked a dog what if because I picked that dog, another dog is gonna have a really bad home, or like a weird home, a home where it's not good for that dog. And then I was like, literally saying, I could never be in a jury because I'm already struggling with this. How am I meant to decide if someone is going to spend the rest of his life or her life in prison? No, I would make that process very hard for everyone. It would go on forever because I will be forever that person in the jury that is like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Which, by the way, this is very random and not true crime related, but there's a new show on Amazon. A friend of mine recommended it to me. Shout out Sarah. It is called, I think, Just a Jury. It's by the makers of The Office, and basically, it's a great concept. So it's a jury out of 12. Everyone's an actor. It's the same concept of like, this is a documentary. We interview you, like, you know, like in The Office. But one person doesn't know it's fake, so he's just a real guy who thinks he's part of a jury. But the things that happen around him are random. It's very funny. It's like a hidden camera kind of vibe almost. It's amazing. I haven't finished it yet. I have a few episodes to go.
Oh my
but
God.
It's hilarious. And one of the people, it's in LA, it's set in LA. One of the people who is in the jury is a famous actor. I actually forget his name again. He's like in the movie Enchanted. Oh my God, he's in so much more movies than that. That he's more famous for. He's in Sonic. They actually talk about that as well. He's a really famous actor.
Not Patrick Dempsey, the other one.
No, the other one.
James Marsden or something? Is that him?
Oh yeah, James Marsden. Yeah, it's him. It's him. And he's playing himself, but he's playing like himself as being a real asshole. So everyone knows he's an actor. It's hilarious. I recommend it. Anyway, just lighting up the mood a little bit.
Also, I have a bone to pick with you because you recommended Fall of the House of Usher, and we started watching the first episode yesterday. What the fuck do you mean it's not scary? Both of us we were terrified. That first episode, what?
I think I just have a different level of what scares me nowadays.
I was so scared.
Oh God, I am sorry. What happens in the first episode? I already forgot that part.
Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's like, you know, with the family and the mum.
I mean, yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's a bit creepy, maybe.
Oh my God, that was bad. But it's very, oh my God, I love it. I'm so intrigued.
How's Kyron dealing with it? Is he okay?
Yes. He was a bit shaken up as well. But
you get used to it.
Yeah, but we're both very intrigued now, so we definitely want to finish it. I like it.
Well, you need to let me know how you find it in the end. And here's your warning to everyone who followed my recommendation but hasn't watched it yet. It may be little bit scary.
Yeah.
Okay, but speaking of scary, let's move on to the second case of today's episode. I'm just going to give some trigger warnings because I knew the case. I've listened to it. Red Handed has a really good episode where they did a lot of research on it. The trigger warning I want to give is, well, just general violence. It's gory and there is sexual abuse happening. It is a wild one. Maybe don't eat anything while you listen to this. I based most of my research also on a documentary because, well, I will let you know towards the end because I don't want to give any spoilers if you don't know the case. I based it on a documentary and lots of articles I found online. But honestly, I don't even want to give too much away. These were the trigger warnings. Let's just get right into it. So, this is the case of Alison Botha, and we're going back into the year of 1994, and we're going to South Africa. It was the 18th of December of 1994, and Alison had a perfect summer's day. She spent it on the beach with friends, and after a day on the beach, they all headed back to her place. They had some pizza, they played some games, and it was just a general wholesome but also ordinary day and evening with friends. At the end of the evening, she gave one of her friends a ride home, just being nice. And also, South Africa is not really the safest place to be. I mean, I've only heard things from Red Handed before they did a case in South Africa, and Hannah goes there quite a lot, and yeah, it just sounds a bit more dangerous than other places.
Yeah, I knew someone who went on like an exchange program there, and she stayed with this family, and she was like, yeah, everyone just has a gun in their purse, and shops have to be in like shopping centers because you don't just have shops on the street because that's too dangerous. And then also there's that couple, Roland and Tiffany, on 90 Day Fiance, and they look at houses, and they all have you
need gated communities to live very safely. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. It sounds wild.
It's probably some regions, but yeah.
You're apparently also not meant to really at night stop at a red traffic light because
okay.
someone might just rob you in your car. But yeah, anyway, so like I said, she gave one of her friends a ride home, and when she got back to her place, her usual parking spot was now taken, which meant that she had to park a bit further down the road instead. So before she even had a chance to get out of her car, there was a knife at her throat, and she heard a male voice threatening her, saying, "Move over or else I'll kill you." That guy then entered the car and took over the driver's seat, and Allison now moved onto the passenger seat. He did then tell her that he didn't want to hurt her, and he just wanted to use the car for an hour or so. And she really wanted to believe in the good and just hoped that he was speaking the truth. So they were driving around. And during the drive, he told her his name was Clinton. He asked her if she has a boyfriend. They started small talk. And that was, in a way, a problem for Allison because with that small talk, if you want to call it that, it gave Allison a quite false sense of security, that it's not as bad as it seems. But that sense of security was taken away quite quickly because a bit later, the guy who called himself Clinton stopped the car, pulled over, and then a second big bad wolf enters the car. He comes and sits on the back seat. They obviously know each other. And in the documentary, it was described that Allison caught the guy's eyes in the rearview mirror, and that was when her relief turned into sheer fear because all she saw was that cold evil. At that moment, Allison realized that she would not make it back home. So they kept driving. They drove past the last streetlights and the last remainder of hope and into just darkness. And then they stopped, and they stopped in an alcove. I didn't know what an alcove is, but I Googled it. So an alcove is a large arched recession formed into a cliff wall. So like a little cave in a cliff wall. Yeah, so after stopping the car in the middle of nowhere, one of the guys just asked her, "Are you going to fight?" I mean, what a question. But yeah, I don't actually want to go into too much detail of all the horrible things that happened. But if you want to know more, like I said, listen to Red Handed or watch the documentary, which we will link in the description box. Or if we can't link, we're at least going to mention the name. The documentary is called Allison. You can watch it on Amazon for free, actually, with some adverts in between. Anyway, what happened then after they asked her, "Are you going to fight?" They forced her into oral sex. They raped her. They said the most disgusting things to her. And yeah, it was just the worst things you can imagine happened. So the two guys were actually, one guy was actually not called Clinton, the one who introduced himself as Clinton. His name was actually Franz, not Clinton. And the other guy's name was Tins. She found that out because the guy who was Clinton was raping her. And after he was done raping her, Tins screamed the name Franz, and ran over. So after Franz was done, it was Tins' go. And at some point, he put his hands around her throat and started stabbing her in the abdomen and in the pubic area about 37 times. That's what medics and doctors say, happened. Then Tins was also the first to cut her throat, but then Franz pushed him out of the way and cut her throat another 16 times.
What?
And then the two monsters drove off. So Allison, and I guess at this point I can actually say that she is miraculously still alive because she's talking in the documentary I watched. Allison said she couldn't feel any pain, but she could hear her breathing through her severed windpipe, and it was horrifying. And it dawned on her at that point that she was injured beyond any hope, and she realized that she was dying. She then says in the documentary she could feel herself leaving her body, like she literally left her body, and she was looking down on herself lying on the floor. And when she looked down at her body, she felt distant to herself, but not quite far enough away to not go back. And then she realized she had a choice to go back, and she did. She said she went back into her body. So yeah, her first thought was that she had to make sure that those two monsters will never, ever get a chance to do anything like this to anyone again. So her first act was to write the names of the two guys into the dirt of the floor with her finger. So she wrote Franz and Tins. And after that, beneath their names, she wrote, "I love Mom." After writing the names and the message to her mom in the sand, she noticed something wet on her leg. And that is when she realized that her intestines were outside her body. But she somehow still was mentally capable enough to think of grabbing the denim shirt that was just lying right next to her on the ground, and she used it to hold her intestines in with the shirt in one hand, and then she started crawling on the floor with the help of the other hand. She felt that she was getting weaker, and hence she needed to move faster, and her whole motivation was she didn't want her mom to have so many unanswered questions about her death. So she had to give it her all. So the crawling wasn't getting her anywhere, and she decided to get up. She had to get up, and somehow she managed to actually hoist herself up onto her feet. But as soon as she got up, everything went black. She couldn't see anything but darkness. And at some point she realized she isn't seeing this darkness because she was about to faint or black out. The darkness that she saw was the night sky, because her head actually flopped backwards.
Shut up.
We all gonna take a little breather here, because this was the part where I was like, fucking hell, how on earth? I mean, whew.
How is this woman alive? Oh my god, I'm baffled.
I mean, her neck was cut 17 times, but in the documentary, they mentioned that they cut her muscle, but somehow missed every important vein that is needed to survive.
Jesus. Okay.
So it didn't stop her. She just took the other hand that wasn't holding in her intestines to literally pull her head up so she could see, and she held it up like that so she could walk, because with all her power she managed to get from that alcove to the nearest road, and that is where she just fell down in the middle of the street. And she was just hoping that a car would come by, but she was also hoping that it's not going to be those two coming back to check or do anything else. So there was one car coming. It slowed down a little bit and then just sped off, just drove past. But then after that car, there was a second car that came by, and thank God for that car, because it was a 20-year-old guy and his friends. They found Alison full with blood and with no clothes on. And this was 1994, but they were lucky because one of the friends had a cell phone, and having a cell phone back then wasn't a common thing. But they used a cell phone, obviously, to call an ambulance. And the 20-year-old guy who was driving the car, he was with her the whole time. He held her hands. He was just waiting with her. It took the ambulance 40 minutes to get to them, which is an insanely long amount of time. But I guess they were in the middle of nowhere. And then once they were in the ambulance, it was a 30-kilometer drive to get to the hospital. That guy who found her was with her the whole time. And it's actually really touching because he was a 20-something-year-old guy and he didn't really know what to do with his life. But that night he decided to become a doctor, and he did.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, it gives me goosebumps, really. The whole story is just a big goosebump moment.
But also how incredibly traumatic. And it's that thing where you're like, would you stop? Because of course you always want to be that person who's like, oh, I would 100% pull over. But if I was in a car by myself, I mean, now of course you would just call an ambulance.
You would maybe drive off nearby and call help.
But it's like, would you pick someone up? And it happens in a lot of cases, right? Where it's like a person covered in blood and screaming, and like, would you pick them up if you were by yourself? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
it's a difficult one. But yeah, finally, after 30 kilometers of driving, Alison arrived at the hospital in a condition no one can imagine. She had been disemboweled. Her neck had 17 cuts from ear to ear. And again, if you're interested in all the medical information, the doctors and some medics are going into detail in the documentation. It's really interesting, but also in some way, the doctors are just saying it's a miracle because her intestines were full of dirt and sand and clay, and they literally had to clean everything before it actually could go back in. The doctor who did this gives an interview in the documentary. It's just shocking and fascinating at the same time. But yeah, so she had surgery and she went to ICU, like to the intensive care station, and then the investigation begins. And so thanks to Alison being the fighter she is and remembering everything, the attackers were actually easily found by the police. It also turned out they weren't strangers to the police because there have been some rapes before. But there was one police officer who was assigned the case, and he came to see Alison, and he gave her a folder with like pictures of possible suspects, several men, and Franz and Tins were in there, and she pointed them out immediately, and they got invited to the police station. The thing was, though, with the prosecution, they were like, it's good that she pointed them out, but it would be a clearer case if she could just say their names. But now you have to think, she had ropes, like tubes down her throat. She needed air, she needed to be ventilated. Everything has been just like her speaking area was cut, so they had to fix it. But she didn't even consider not taking those tubes out. She was like, take those tubes out, and she managed to say the names of those two. Obviously, Franz and Tins did not expect her to survive this. So once they were, questioned, they just pled guilty because they were like, obviously everything will come out. And yeah, the charges that they pled guilty to were 8 charges. They included kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder. And they were both found guilty and sentenced to life in prison in August 1995. The judge is also in the documentary, and in the interview, he said that if the death penalty would have still been active in South Africa, he would have considered it. And yeah, even though the worst was behind Alison, she obviously still suffered from physical and emotional scars from all of this. And in order to recover, though, like, she fell in a deep depression. Obviously, this is something you can't even imagine going through. Nothing meant anything to her anymore. Then she got invited the first time to give a speech and talk to other victims and survivors, I actually want to call them, of things like similar situations and rape. And yeah, she decided that she needed to face what happened to her, and she began traveling around the world. She told her story in at least 35 countries. She was one of the first women from South Africa to speak publicly about rape, both in her home country and abroad. And she just inspired other survivors, and still inspires other survivors, to come forward and tell their stories as well. But Alison says one of the greatest gifts of all has been the birth of her 2 sons, because during her attack, that guy specifically tried to destroy her reproductive organs. She was not meant to ever actually be able to get pregnant, but she gave birth to her first child in 2003, and she also had a second son, which just makes, it just makes the whole thing of having the option to have children for her even more positive. And yeah, today her story stands as both of an example of human depravity, but also the strength of the human spirit. I mean, I'm just imagining, I can't even imagine, but like, I feel like I would be the person of like, I'm just going to lie here and die. I don't know if I wouldn't actually could even consider getting up when I realize my organs are out of my body.
I know. Yeah, it's very difficult to say, because my first thought
You don't know.
was,
Yeah.
I can't stand blood, like even my own blood. If I cut my finger, I faint. So
Yeah.
my first thought was like, I would just faint every single time I looked at myself. But then I don't know. I think there is something. It's just survival instinct that it takes over, I think, and it's difficult to predict if that will happen, or if you will, how you will react in that moment. But I am just absolutely floored by how clear this woman's mind is in that moment.
How she was
How
thinking,
she's like,
how clear she was thinking.
I need to write down these names. I need to. Yeah, that's unbelievable. And it's exactly like you said. I think that's the perfect way to describe this. It shows like the worst, but also the worst of humanity, but then also how strong humans can be. And then and there are good people out there, like these guys who pulled over and everything, of course, like because that's a risk as well, because you don't know if these people are still out there somewhere, or if they will see her get in, or
Exactly. But yeah, just to give another insight of what kind of fucking walking garbage those two monsters are. So apparently there were rapes before. They raped two women. One of them was pregnant. The pregnant one managed to go to the police and tell, and I think that's why they were, or at least Franz was in prison before. Franz has a wife and a child, by the way. He had that wife and child before he did all those horrible things to Alison. And then at some point, filmmakers asked for an interview with Franz while he was in prison, and he had demands. He wanted, first of all, his first demand was he wants a letter of forgiveness signed by Alison herself. And then he wanted, and this is just, I mean, I don't even know. He wanted the profit shares from Alison's book sales and motivational speaking visits because he believes that what he did is the reason for her success story. Okay. I mean, yeah.
I have nothing to say to this.
No. But of course, that request was denied. But what infuriates me, because I was Googling what's going on with them now. So according to a few articles I read from July this year, July 2023, they are both no longer behind bars. And after almost 3 decades in prison, they've been let out for parole, apparently.
Okay. How old are they? Are they like very old men or not?
I don't know how old they were. They didn't really say.
Okay.
The actors that reenact some of the scenes look like end of 20s, 30s. So I hope they are like, I mean, Alison is in her 50s now.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that is the...
Yeah, it doesn't matter that they still even have a couple of nice years. It's not...
I hope not that they have nice years. I hope they live in the worst fucking sewage area that they can live in and just suffering every day. This is just it's such a tragic story, but I find it so impressive that this woman managed to do everything she did and now travels and tells the story over and over and over again. It's just wild what people can do, honestly.
Yeah. This is shocking. I get why this is the case that shocked you.
Yeah.
But yeah, because when when looking for like the cases that shocked us, of course, both you and I listen to lots of true crime, and then sometimes when I'm like out and about all day and I go for a big walk, sometimes several episodes in a row, and it's horrible to say, but you do after a while become, I don't know, almost like desensitized to it.
Oh, you definitely do. It's like Hannah and Shruti say that a lot in Red Handed, and I know we keep talking about him, but I'm sorry, we're a fan. They do say when they do like Halloween specials that they try to find the most gruesome or worst cases they could find, but then they're like, we are sorry because we don't know what's brutal anymore because everything just seems wild at this point.
I know. You don't know anymore, and you don't know what the person who maybe doesn't listen to true crime a lot will find brutal. But yeah, I think there's different, because our cases are very different, of course. Like yours is very brutal and physical just and graphic and everything, whereas mine is more like I think for me, the reason why that is one that sticks, or like that is still on my mind quite often, is because it was the first, like I was and the women on the Volksjury, the Flemish podcast, say this as well. This was a very big case, and we were actually old enough already to kind of to know that and like to know what was going on. Because there's other big cases in Belgium, but I was just too young, or I hadn't been born yet to really realize it. But this was one, like I said, it was so all over the media and everything. And yeah, that this was something where, like I said, this was such the number one topic of conversation, I think, during that period. It was like the thing that people would talk about when they went to to a bar, and it did raise so many questions around, okay, when is someone guilty and when can you lock someone up? And so that's, I think, why this is just something that stays with me, just like the staircase murder, just like all of those, because it's so like, yeah, how
it's the fact that you never will know what actually really, really happened in that situation with those cases. And it is scary. It's just scary on different levels. It's the scariness of, can I just literally be, like you said, at the wrong time, at the wrong place, at the wrong time, and I will be the suspect. You don't know.
No. And people do horrible, because something I heard, I think it was on Red Handed as well, probably, was this basically this woman in America. She was Latin American, and then she was an aunt, so she had nieces, and she was gay. And then this was, I don't know, I think in the 80s, maybe 90s. And then she had a couple of friends over, like a couple of women, and the children were staying at hers as well. But basically the children's dad, so her sister's ex, wanted to get with her, but she had rejected him and he felt rejected. So he basically put the children up to testifying and telling the police that they had all sexually abused the children. And they all of these people went to prison for like 15 years or something, because they were gay women, they were Mexican. Again, it's that thing of, well, in the US, but everywhere, where it's like, I bet they did it because, of course, like, they're people of color and they're gay, like, and
it's just an easy story to sell to the public and to the media.
And then as the children got older, they actually realized that none of that had happened. So then they really regretted it, and it's horrible for the children as well, because you must feel so guilty. But then even these friends, and that was really something that was on my mind for a couple of days, because I was like, Jesus Christ, all these women, like the friends, all they did was literally go over there for a glass of wine or something, and before you know it, you're in prison for 15 years. And that is the thing that scares me the most, is like, you can literally be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
I know, I'm so paranoid sometimes, and that is purely because I listen to true crime all the time. But sometimes I'm like, well, let's say I'm at yours. I'm thinking, should I just take some random pictures of me doing random things for the next few, until I know you have seen someone else? Because if anything will happen to you, I will be the last person who have seen you that day, and I never want to be in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. And if the police were to check my browser history, I would be fucked.
Oh, me too. And that can actually get you into prison. There's another true crime podcast, I've mentioned them before, Mordav X. They have like their main true crime podcast, but then they did what's it called? Investigative podcast, where they looked into this one guy in Germany who is in prison still because of circumstantial evidence only, and they are actually investigating if he actually just should not be in prison. And one of the circumstantial evidence thingies was that his wife Googled, or he Googled, what police dogs can smell, or something about the police dogs and the smelling. And obviously he Googled, I mean, I would Google that. If someone would tell me something, police dogs will come tomorrow and check everything, I would just want to Google, because I'm like, fuck, I didn't do this, but I once had a gun and they are sniffer dogs for like gunpowder. Will they still smell it? Like, it's normal to Google this. But yeah, anyway, that's a whole other big story for all the ones who speak German. There are like several episodes on this.
Yeah, and it's also so difficult to know like what's normal behavior and what isn't, because that's a lot of the time as well, when things are especially on TV or something, that it's like, oh, but they don't react the way someone who's innocent would normally behave.
And you just don't know how you would react. I mean, you might have a fight or flight reaction, but you might also just freeze and don't do anything. Like, you don't know. You maybe cry, or you maybe never talk again. Like, you don't know. And I don't think it should be analyzed on how people react in certain situations.
No, and it's the same with, kind of with my case as well, where it's like, okay, it makes her look very bad that she's the one who finds that thing, and like, why does she go to the police? But then people say, well, if she did do it, you would just stay away from the police. But then maybe she did do it, and she was like, oh, but if I actively go to the police, then nobody will, it's so many people have so many different perceptions of this. I would never do this. If I had done this, I would do this. So you just can't know.
You just don't know.
cannot.
In the end, the answer is you don't know and don't take it as evidence. Or like it's with the 911 calls, the 999 calls, when the emergency calls go in and they're recorded and it's like, but she wasn't crying. It's like, well, maybe she hasn't registered yet what really happened. Like you just don't know. Oh well. Wow. That was something today.
Yes, I liked it, but it's a lot of work, I have to say. These true crime podcasters,
Yeah. I have so much respect for the true crime podcasters because you also just want to be fair to the survivors or victims or, yeah. And it's there's so much stuff out there. And also when you research true crime cases, you need to be careful because sometimes you come across very scary pictures that you were not meant to see.
Yeah, well, I did enjoy this in a weird way, in a sick and twisted way. So, yeah, let us know if you liked this as well. Then maybe we can do it again.
In a year's time. I need to recover.
Yeah. For Halloween or something.
Yeah. Well, like we said, this is like a Halloween special. It's not our usual program. We are back next week with our actual theme that we started before Halloween, the Shit, I'm a Woman theme. And we hope you couldn't relate to anything that we talked about today. And a happy Halloween, because we are actually releasing this episode on Tuesday, not on Wednesday, because Tuesday will be the 31st of October. Yeah.
And do let us know if you know of any cases that really shook you, and yeah.
Or any cold cases that still haunt you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay. See you. Well, when is it? Next Wednesday. See you next Wednesday.
See you next Wednesday. And yeah. Keep listening. Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.